Welcome to the Covered Bridges in New Hampshire podcast, where we discuss all things related to covered bridges in the Granite State. Here's your host, Kim Chandler.
Hello, Covered Bridge people, and welcome to the podcast. Today we're speaking with Michael Haley Goldman, Executive Director of New Hampshire Humanities. Michael discusses how the organization connects communities through stories and ideas and highlights its statewide Speakers Bureau that brings free public programs to communities across New Hampshire. Here we go. In this episode, we'll learn about New Hampshire Humanities and how the humanities show up in everyday community life, from storytelling and public conversation to local programs that help people connect with history, culture, and place. We also explore Humanities to Go, the organization's statewide program that brings speakers and events into libraries, museums, and community spaces across New Hampshire. We're speaking today with Michael Haley Goldman. Michael joined New Hampshire Humanities in September 2021 after an impressive career at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., where he served as director of future projects. During his time at the museum, he also served as director of the Benjamin and Vladka Mead Registry of Holocaust Survivors and director of Global Classroom and Evaluation. Michael has also served as a grant reviewer for the National Endowment of the Humanities Institute for Museum and Library Services, as well as on many other advisory groups. He also co-taught museum evaluation at the Columbia College of Arts and Sciences at the George Washington University with his wife, Kate Haley Goldman. Michael holds a master's in computing and education from Columbia University Teachers College in New York and a Bachelor of Arts in philosophy from Haverford College in Pennsylvania. He relocated from Maryland to Concord, New Hampshire with his family. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for letting me be here. It's great to get a chance to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you for talking to me today. Can you tell us about New Hampshire Humanities, what the organization is, and what role does it play across the state?
New Hampshire Humanities is the one organization in the state of New Hampshire that is here to really make sure that the cultural work of the state is strong and happening in every corner of the state and accessible to everybody in New Hampshire. We are specifically the humanities, not the arts, which is a detail that is often confusing for people, but we do partner with groups that do the arts. The humanities is, in its biggest way, all the things we do together to understand who we are and where we came from and where we're going. So it's all around you all the time. So we want to make sure that people have the opportunity to experience those kind of conversations and be part of what brings people together in the state.
When people hear the word humanities, it can sometimes feel a little abstract, and I think you've already answered this, but how do you define humanities and what does that look like through the programs and conversations that you support?
So a lot of the way people experience the humanities is through academic subjects. I find that to be a really horrible way to necessarily define the humanities, but it's
Right.
sometimes helpful for people to think about that when you're in school, the courses in the humanities are things like English and literature, history, anthropology, a lot of those human-centered studies that we do. But our organization is really public humanities, so it's really about getting it outside of the classroom and how the ways that we together look at what we do as humans happens, right? You know, I keep on saying that humanities is not a team sport, and that I'm sorry, it is a team sport. Wow, I did that fully backwards. The humanities is a team sport. The um, the idea that you don't really do history alone in a
Right.
bubble, right? The way
Right.
you understand history is by interacting with other people to look at the past in meaningful ways. And we do that all the time, whether we're doing it formally or informally. But at its heart, it's how we come together as people and really think about all the things that have shaped us, all the things that are interesting to us, all the things that we want to look at going forward.
Mhm.
Um, so it really is broad. And some of the artificial distinctions that exist are really around the way that funding gets shaped and other things. But if you just really think about it, that great exploration of what it is to be human, it's probably putting you in the right direction.
That's excellent. And your New Hampshire Humanities to Go or your Speakers Bureau brings speakers, exhibits, and programs to communities across the state. Can you talk a little bit about how that process works and what types of topics do these programs usually explore?
This is one. Thank you for asking about Humanities to Go. It is really a backbone program of what we do in the state, and it is kind of a speakers bureau. But the way that it functions is that we bring in great speakers and make sure we understand what kind of programs they're doing, and then we make those programs available for free to small organizations deep in communities. The hubs in our communities, like libraries and museums and historical societies and community centers, can for free bring in these amazing humanities programs to their organizations and without a cost. The kinds of programs we have varies year to year. We have a kind of a core group of programs that continue each year, but we usually will add another kind of batch of programs that help support some of the larger themes that we want to talk about within a year. This year, obviously, it's the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So
Right.
there's a lot of interest in early American history about the ideas of the Declaration and the Constitution. So we do try to kind of uh, use this as an opportunity to talk about um, areas of shared interest. Next year, we're going to be talking about the promise and perils of innovation,
Okay.
uh, and then we've got some ideas of what happens for the next couple of years after that. When it comes down to it, some of the most popular programs, not surprisingly, are about New Hampshire.
Hmm.
People really love to talk about this place we live, and the not only the people of this state, but the places of this state and the ideas of this state. So, one of the 250th programs that's most popular is a program done in partnership with the New Hampshire Historical Society called Redcoats and Rebels, and it's about the specific New Hampshire history of the American Revolution, which is often something you don't get in the larger history, seeing how it ties to us.
You're right. As an active DAR member, I can attest that a lot of people are not aware that the revolution really started in New Hampshire, if you ask me.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Fort William and Mary, I tell you, I didn't
exactly.
miss
Yeah,
it all until I
exactly.
moved to New Hampshire.
Exactly. And many of your programs, like as you mentioned, take place in libraries and museums and other community groups. What role do those community institutions play in keeping history and culture visible at the local level?
In my opinion, these types of organizations are central to the character of our communities. They're central hubs of our communities. Is where people come together for all kinds of reasons, and to provide them the support to be that community hub that they are is really important to the way that we work at New Hampshire Humanities. Um, we rely on our libraries, we rely on our historical societies, we rely on our community centers to give us those opportunities to come together and to talk about things and to understand the past and see our shared history, to talk about ideas. So these are the places that really make, I think, our communities what they are,
Hmm.
and I think they're totally undervalued in pretty much every state. So the more that we can think about the important role they play, the better.
And one thing I've learned as being part of the Humanities to Go is those organizations rely on you as well to provide the funding support to have the programs that they offer. I know at our leadership New Hampshire group last month when you were there, um, the the librarian that was there mentioned specifically that her speaker's budget is almost zero, and without support from your organization, she wouldn't be able to provide programs. And I wonder what that's been like and what that looks like for you, what it has looked like in the past and what it looks like now.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's not unusual, right? I mean, there are some libraries that are very well off in the state, but libraries are often working on the tiniest budgets all around the state, and we are really fortunate that we have a huge number of independent libraries in New Hampshire. But it's not unusual to hear that there is no program budget or there's a tiny program budget where on their own they really can't afford to create programming. Although often they're really creative and find ways to do it for free. But we provide free programming through the Humanities to Go program. We provide other kinds of special programs. We are doing a series of programs around the 250th, which provides a speaker and access to the Ken Burns documentary to have a conversation within your community, and that's often in libraries. Um,
Mm.
any way that we can to provide these chances for the libraries to have free access to high quality programming. It's one of the things that drives us. under normal conditions, we usually have had in the past federal funding that we give out as grants as well. So it's a supplement to the idea that for Humanities to Go, for example, we are the ones picking the programs, and then we're making a menu of programs available to libraries and museums and historical societies and other groups. But we've usually paired that with a grants program
Hmm.
that allows people to either go for a small grant of $1,000 to $2,000 or a large grant for up to $10,000 to create their own programming. And that's where you'll see libraries and other groups be able to be creative themselves about what kind of programming is really important for their town and their community. Things that you'll see, there was a great proposal to do a robotics petting zoo to talk about the ideas of robotics and AI. There was one of the library systems up in the North Country tend to share programs where they'll do something thematically across several libraries.
Hmm.
You'll see local reads where there'll be a book selected for a series of communities.
Hmm.
And by having grant money that people can apply for this funding, it totally gives people an opportunity to support the kind of programs they want to see locally without having to come to us. That is funding that is not currently available to us because of changes in federal support for the Humanities Councils, which
Hmm.
I can talk about in more detail if it's helpful. Um, but that means that it really is a little sad that that is a program that is paused right now because we really think it's a valuable way to encourage creative use of resources into libraries and other groups around the state.
Hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about the changes with the federal funding and how that's affected you?
Yeah, so it was about a year ago that the National Endowment for the Humanities, which is our partner organization, I should mention, we are not like the State Council for the Arts. State Council for the Arts is a separate organization that's embedded in state government in New Hampshire.
Hmm.
They also receive federal funding from a different agency, from the National Endowment for the Arts. When our organization was started just over 50 years ago in the 70s, we were started as an independent nonprofit that would bring federal investment into the state that was matched by us fundraising within the state, more or less dollar for dollar. So every dollar we raised meant that we could bring in an additional dollar of federal support for the cultural work in the state.
Hmm.
That worked really well for 50 years. Last year, the unprecedented decision was to cancel all contracts and all agreements with organizations, including all 56 state and jurisdictional councils for the humanities around the country. That was about halfway through the year, so we had already received about half of the federal funding we expected, but it was more or less cut out overnight. Since then, there's been a lot of obviously discussion, but what it meant was almost immediately we had to restructure our programming and our staffing.
Hmm.
We had made the decision, and we really appreciate the community support here in New Hampshire, that we would be cutting back our program as minimally as possible. We did reduce staff starting in the fall, so we were able to preserve staff until the November 1st start of our fiscal year. Um, and we planned this year's budget. Our fiscal year happens to run from November through October, which
Hmm.
is a gory detail you don't need to know, but there's a whole lot around that. Um, but what we realized was that if we planned appropriately with a smaller staff, we could preserve the core programming that we do, and not rely on federal funding, but rely on the support of the people in New Hampshire who had been supporting us for matching funds for all these years.
Excellent.
So as a result, we are a leaner organization. We're a smaller staff. We're relying more on partnerships. We don't do grants currently, but we have preserved core programs, including Humanities to Go,
Hmm.
and another program that we do called Connections, which is an adult literacy program all around the state. And then we are able to do some additional programming like the America at 250, the US at 250 program that I mentioned earlier. Um, I would also be remiss if I did not mention that a bipartisan group in Congress, not one side or the other, a bipartisan group in Congress voted to restore the NEH budget at the level that it was originally planned for 2025 for this year.
Hmm.
Now, that is promising, but we don't have a guarantee that the agency itself will see that money as an obligation to distribute to the humanities councils the way that it has in the past. So
Okay.
even though there is a promise of restored funding, we haven't seen any restored funding yet from the federal government.
Okay.
That is okay for us because we are not planning for federal funding, and we might see some federal funding down the line. We just won't see the levels that we've had in the past, which means it's even more important that we have the support of the state. Without the support of the state, we wouldn't continue to do the work that we're doing.
Right. Are other states' humanities councils also not affiliated with their government? Are they also independent, or
It
is it different?
it runs it's different state to state. With the but absolutely every state has an independent nonprofit as its council, so none of them are embedded in the state.
Okay.
However, some of them do have really excellent relationships with their states and do receive state funding, which we do not. We've never received state funding as such, although we do work with the state government in other ways.
Okay.
But some states receive state funding as well as federal funding, but that's never been the case in New Hampshire.
Right. Are there benefits to being an independent entity as opposed to being like the Council for the Arts as part of the state?
Well, I mean, in this most recent year, I would say yes, absolutely. There's some years I might not have said that, but as you've seen, the decision in budgeting for the state of New Hampshire reduced the budget for the State Council for the Arts from, I'm going to get this number slightly wrong. It was over a million. I want to say it was 1.2 million, down to about 180,000 or $200,000. So I'm sorry, I'm not getting those numbers exactly right.
Wow.
But basically, they reduced all of the budgetary work within the state, and that had two major impacts. One is they couldn't maintain a staff except for one person within the State Council for the Arts when that decision was made,
Mm.
and that state funding is used to match federal funding coming into the state. They're not a nonprofit; they can't fundraise in the way that we do. So without the state funding, um, and with the expectation that state funding is used to match federal dollars, they don't have a direct way um, to bring funding into the state. So not being caught in the middle of that is an
Mhm.
advantage.
Right.
We also, and this is something I didn't fully understand, because we have a long history of philanthropy within the state of New Hampshire supporting humanities and cultural work. We have a network of people that we've been working with to provide financial support for New Hampshire humanities that matches federal dollars. Not every state actually has that either.
Okay.
So we are fortunate that we already have um, a strong muscle of working with the public to provide funding for the humanities in the state, and that's not something to take for granted. So we really appreciate the fact that that's well established here in New Hampshire.
That's excellent. In our smaller communities, our historic structures are very critical to a lot of towns and cities, and not just covered bridges, which of course is my interest area, but also mills and town halls and historic meeting houses, and they're part of the New Hampshire landscape. I think in a way that's different than maybe other parts of the country. And how do you think that storytelling and public conversations can help communities see these places as things that we need to save, that we need to care for? And how does your humanities programming tie into that?
It's a great question. I mean, I think the story of who we are as a community is something really central to everyone, right? All people, right, want to know who they are and where they came from. But I think it's even stronger in New Hampshire, where whether it's the mills or the meeting houses, the landscape is still written with our past in a very immediate way. And I think that provides a great opportunity, and it's what I love about the programs that are about New Hampshire, like covered bridges and meeting houses and stone walls and all of the
Stone walls,
wonderful
yeah.
kind of programs, um, that they give people the opportunity to really dig into a history that they kind of have bumped into but might not really appreciate at a full level. And it it's probably too strong to say that it's one of the things we've kind of lost, is the ability to talk with each other because we don't have a sense of that shared community, right? And I'm new to the state. I know there's a whole, thing about, what does it mean to be new to a state, and how many generations might you be considered new to a state, and all of those kinds of, um, somewhat, trite quotes. But, you know, um, but even if you're new to the state, the idea that there is a clear history written into the fabric of
Mhm.
of New Hampshire, it also, I think, plays out in the kind of institutions we have. Um, not every section of the country has this incredible wealth of small historical societies in so many of the communities. That's not
Mhm.
something you see everywhere. The library system is fairly not entirely unique, but fairly unusual in that it's very much community to community and not done by county or by region in a way that you see
Right.
in other states. And this is a strength and also a possible danger for the state.
Mhm.
Um, when you have very, very small communities still trying to support these wonderful little organizations, when they've had a change in population, when they've had a change in resources, the worry is that these little places will continue to disappear.
Mhm.
Um, and yet, these are such unique parts of our communities. How do we make sure that they stay vibrant and fresh within the current makeup of the town?
Right.
That's one of the questions we ask all the time.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed, I've been, kind of on the circuit for the last 2.5 years talking about covered bridges, and in some communities, there are people that will show up to the program that already know a lot about their community. They know about the covered bridge, they already know the history. Sometimes they know more than I do, and they,
Mm,
share things with me that I haven't learned, but I've also noticed that, and I'll use Wilton, as a reference point. They have an historic box pony covered bridge there that people don't realize is actually an historic and an authentic covered bridge because it doesn't have a roof, and it's in
mm,
horrible shape. It's not going to make it if people don't start to take care of it, and so, they had me out to speak about the bridge, and it has started a whole process of having people in the covered bridge community come and evaluate the bridge, and they're starting to do fundraising to save the bridge, and I certainly don't take credit for it, but I feel grateful that I was at least a part of that moving forward to help them to get people in the greater community to understand the value of this bridge because it's something no one drives over it anymore and you probably don't even see it if you're driving by
mhm.
it. And that's just one example, I think, of how, I think of the stone wall program. I live in a very small community. I'm looking out my window right now. There's stone walls everywhere, and for people, they don't understand what they mean, what the value is, and what their history is. And I think it's really critical that people can attend these programs to learn more about our state.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's wonderful that, yeah, you've been able to contribute to people appreciating the bridge that they have that they don't even recognize is really fabulous, and where are those opportunities? I mean, it's a the reality for all of us, right? We're all busy, we all have so many things on our minds. I think part of the trick is if you can just capture people's attention for just a moment to see some of these things that are there, you have that opportunity to really pull people into the story, and to help people kind of understand their connection to the story. I think that's the part that,
Mhm,
whether we're looking for the contrast of stories that are unfamiliar to us, or whether we're looking for the familiarity of stories that we see ourselves in, uh, it's an incredibly powerful way for us to I mean, everything we've been talking about, to know who we are and where we're coming from
mhm,
and why that might be something that's important. Feeling rootless is definitely a problem, for many people, right? That, we don't know enough. If our mission is to really reach everybody within the state of New Hampshire, with a tiny staff, we're not gonna do that. The way that we
mhm,
really try to do that is by making sure that each individual community has ties into the opportunities to make these connections. And I'm really impressed time and time again about how much there are in each community someone who is really dedicated to thinking about what brings that community together and
mhm.
what the story is that they're trying to tell. And so every opportunity we have to support that is something that we want to be doing.
Great. Have you seen any specific topics or themes in New Hampshire that seem to resonate most with audiences?
Well, and
I know we're in America 250
yeah,
and the Ken Burns documentary is just I've seen it twice. It's amazing.
we're partnered with New Hampshire Public Broadcasting, to provide access to a 30-minute screener on the film. So for a lot of people, this is their moment to kind of be, caught up in what's going on in the beautiful documentary that's there, and then talk about it. And people are so reflective if you give them the chance, if they give themselves a chance to stop and think.
Mhm,
I've only been to a couple of these programs so far, but they're really impressive when people can, come together and talk about what did things look like 250 years ago, what was important to us then, what's important to us now, and so almost all of this rich material, if you have the right speaker or facilitator or opportunity, can be a great galvanizing moment to kind of
Mhm.
talk about these kinds of topics. Next year, I think we're still putting together the programs for next year, but we have this great opportunity to bring in a small Smithsonian exhibit that's about innovation in small communities.
Oh, nice.
It's something. This is our second round of doing a Smithsonian traveling exhibition in partnership with Vermont, the council there. So it'll tour to 3 different locations in New Hampshire, and it's a really upbeat um, the exhibition. It really is trying to remind people that a lot of creative innovation happens, not just technological innovation, but social innovation, artistic innovation, different ways to bring people together innovatively within small communities, and that
Mhm.
happens. And it seems to me such a great story to remind people about with each of the small communities that will be in around the state.
Mhm.
And I can't help but assume that as we talk about innovation, we're also going to start getting the dark side of this as well, which is why we think that we talk about this as if we talk about this as the promise and perils of innovation, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to want to talk about things. Artificial intelligence being the thing that everybody goes to almost immediately. And we already have started doing a few programs around that.
Mhm.
Artificial intelligence is that great point of so much potential and excitement, as well as so much fear and possible threat to the kinds of questions, threats, to the kind of issues that are important to us. Arts being one of them, right? What does it mean when when artistic creation could become something that's created by machine in a way that is overrunning the ability for artists to actually pursue their arts? Those are the kinds of questions that people are really concerned about and should be. And I love the idea that we might be able to have really grassroots discussions, town by town around the state, to talk about what are the impacts of these kinds of changes, these kind of innovations on the way we live our lives, not just conceptually as a country, but individually as members of individual communities.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping that that's going to be something that we'll really have some great programming around for next year. But whenever I've brought it up, artificial intelligence is definitely on people's minds.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm a high school counselor, so I see a lot of AI being used in the high school, sometimes for good and sometimes not for good. And
Hmm.
it's a real challenge for us to educate students about how to use it, but we also have to educate ourselves about using it too. But I was thinking as you were talking about, unless you're in a school, unless you're in a classroom setting, whether it's college or high school, there really aren't a lot of opportunities for people to come together and have a conversation. So I think these programs are really critical for communities to be able to talk and to share rather than just listen, um, because we're not very connected.
Yeah. And we hear that again and again. I mean, and I have to remember I started in 2021, fall of 2021. And so at that moment, we were just coming out of lockdowns around the
Mhm.
pandemic, and people were really desperate to interact with people then. People really missed those kinds of interactions. And we've seen that continue. And one of the other projects we're working on right now is a series of community conversations that we're doing with the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. They have been helping to rebuild or build new community centers in a lot of communities around the state.
Oh,
And we've partnered with them on what we're calling community conversations to get into a certain number of those locations and other locations in towns. And it's a very humanities approach. We don't want it to be a civic dialogue about how to use a new space. We don't want to talk about, is it yoga or basketball?
right.
One, people get really heated about how
Mhm.
how we decide to use resources. And what the humanities allows those conversations to be about is the questions of our values, the questions of who are we as a community? What do we all share as values? What do we want to see in terms of the well-being of our community? Because that, no matter where you fall on your town's budget discussion, or about the placement of a school, or the use of a resource, those shared values are what allow us to really have common conversations. And
Mhm.
that's the humanities at work
Yeah.
right there.
I think that's excellent, especially in these times of people, um, interacting with fellow townspeople on a social media platform in probably not the most positive way. It's great to get people out and having conversations that can be productive and helpful and not hurtful.
I mean, and there's so much room, promise and peril of innovation right there, right? If you think about the way that social media was imagined when it was being created and the way that it is in practice right now, there's a really big divide between that potential to really give people an opportunity to stay connected with one another, and how it's become a divisive
Hmm.
force in people's lives.
Right. Right. So, for towns and libraries and historical organizations that might want to host a program, how can they partner with you to do that?
So we run 4 times a year. We open up to Humanities to Go to people who want to propose who want to bring a program into their organization. And if you go on our website at nhhumanities.org, you can find a link to our programs that way. And go to Humanities to Go and find out. I believe we just passed a deadline because it's April
Hmm.
still today. So that means April, May. I have to look at the calendar. Should be around midsummer
Yeah.
is the next opportunity to apply for programs. And any nonprofit is eligible to host a program, and just go and look at the catalog of all these amazing speakers, and whether it's again covered bridges or all the way to artificial intelligence. um,
Hmm.
get your organization signed up for some of those programs, and we can provide those. Also, keep an eye open for upcoming programs. Right now, we're not running anything new because we are finishing the 250th work. That's all happening right now, and we've already finished the applications for the next set of community conversations, which will be coming out in the summer and fall. But by the fall, we'll be announcing new programs for next year, and those will be probably very similarly like the US at 250, things that everybody has an opportunity to take part in.
Excellent. Thank you. So, you've been here since 2021. How many covered bridges have you seen?
I think two, but don't ask me where they were because my geography is still really, really terrible.
Okay.
Um,
Well, that's okay. You've seen two. That's a good thing.
I've seen 2, and I wanna say one was up in the North Country somewhere,
Okay.
maybe? I mean, I don't know that it was actually in Coos County, but I feel like some of the little towns in the mountains, there was one up there somewhere. Does that
Okay.
sound right?
Yes.
I don't know,
Yes.
how many are there in the state? What's the actual number?
So there are 58 that have a state number, and then there are 3 box ponies, and then there are more authentic covered bridges that have been built since. So there are about 70. So
About 70.
so you have about 68 more to go.
Okay, that's good. I mean, and you're right, it's one of those things where, especially if they're not something you drive over anymore, how do you find them?
Well, some of them are still open, but
Mhm,
luckily, a lot of communities have bypassed the covered bridge and decided that they would keep it, which is fabulous. But we used to have
mhm.
about 470.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, do you mind if I ask you more questions?
No, go ahead.
So, um, how like, what was the drop off period? Like, I mean, I'm assuming there was a period of time when with car traffic getting to be busy enough that they
Mhm.
started removing them and putting in new bridges and things like that. But that
Exactly.
I was assuming
Yeah.
kind of went somewhere in the early 20th century or something where a
Yep.
lot of them would have dropped off.
Yeah, a lot of them dropped off in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s,
Hmm.
because as you mentioned, when people started driving vehicles, it wasn't really practical to have a small one-lane covered bridge, especially if you think about Concord. Concord had several very
Hmm.
large covered bridges, but they're not practical for that traffic level, so communities made a choice to take them
Hmm.
down, and some were lost to floods, weather events, and fire, and arson, believe it or not, is still the number one
Hmm.
cause of loss of covered bridges today.
Oh, that's terrible.
I know, I know, and I feel like when I'm presenting, and thank you very much for, accepting me into the Humanities to Go program and for allowing me those opportunities. People don't know what they don't know, and people like covered bridges, and I usually start my programs by talking about how many we had, why we lost them, and why we still have the
Hmm.
ones that we have, and it opens people's minds and eyes, I think, to realize that there are a lot of organizations in the state that work together to ensure that we keep our history with covered bridges, and I feel grateful for the opportunity to be able to share that.
Well, and thank you for getting out there on the road. I mean, that's the thing that, people don't always appreciate about Humanities to Go speakers is that it does mean that you're on call to go all around the state, which is great for some people, but
Yeah, I
it is
love it.
also a lot of work.
It is, but I
Um,
love it. It's fun. It's really fun. One other question I have that I didn't, send to you ahead of time was, I noticed in my programs that a lot of the people that come to the programs are my age. I'm in my mid-50s, or older, and it's
mhm.
a struggle to get younger people involved, and I wonder what you're seeing on your end about getting our youth involved in these programs.
Yeah, there's a major kind of question around Humanities to Go about, there's this, I had a great, although disturbing conversation with a library director that might have been in the North Country, who loves the Humanities to Go program, but her staff feels like it won't stay for them because they're for old people, and she's like, "No, you don't understand. You really should."
Oh,
But there's
no.
that sense of it, right?
Mhm,
And so there's a variety of ways that we're talking about how do we bridge this to different generations. There is the reality of, the best way to get a younger generation is really to do family programming, but family programming happens at different times.
right.
And a lot of the Humanities to Go programs aren't really designed for families; they're designed for adults.
Mhm,
And we've been talking about different ways to start to tap into a different audience by having a slightly different set of programming. Um,
mhm,
the other thing that we do in terms of supporting humanities work within the state, not through Humanities to Go for teens, is we support a lot of the humanities-based, somewhat extracurricular programs around the state, and there are at least 4 or 5 that are really amazing. National History Day,
yeah,
New Hampshire's own National History Day is a
mhm,
really important one,
mhm,
and even though it sometimes is incorporated into classes, it's often an extracurricular activity for students,
mhm,
depending on how the school handles it. There's a really fabulous student-run, um, kind of ethics program that comes out of Sauhegan High School and, takes place every year at, University of New Hampshire
that's
called
hype,
HYPE.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah, we have
hosting
students that
young
go to
young
that, mhm,
philosophy enthusiasts,
yeah,
and it's a beautiful program because the students pick the themes, they train the, student facilitators for the discussions,
mhm,
and bring hundreds and hundreds of kids from around the region together for a really student-led discussion, which, is really amazing, and
mhm,
we have traditionally supported that as a program within the state. We are also, support a lot of the work going on in New Hampshire Civics, which is looking at civics education
mhm,
mainly through for K-12 students. We've been longtime supporters of one of their main lecture series and some of the other things they've been doing around that, which has been customized to be more and more for a younger audience in recent years. In fact, this year's speaker was speaking to a group of fourth graders, which was really a much younger audience than I'm used to. It was really a fascinating program and well done. So we do support a lot of youth activity around the humanities, although it's not in the HCG program itself.
mhm,
So one way to think about it is different programs might serve different audiences, and we might have a spinoff that's really a little bit more around family programming
mhm,
that could get into libraries and other locations.
excellent, excellent. Any last thoughts or anything you'd like to wrap up this conversation with about New Hampshire humanities?
Well, I mean, I think it's nice to come together in your specific focus on a particular moment of the history and way the history comes to life within the state, and New Hampshire Humanities, and we have the same goals. Like we want to be part of that conversation
Mhm,
about the past and about who we are, and so thank you for what you do. I think that's really great work, and I think is, the message I think for the public is how do you get involved with being part of this cultural conversation that we're
mhm,
all in? What are the different ways that you can be a part of it? Is important, and whether it's by going to programs or being involved with organizations like New Hampshire Humanities or your local library or your local historical society, we all have the opportunity to take a step into that world and support it and grow it, and that's the most important thing.
yeah, great. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thanks for letting me be here. It's great talking with you.
The Covered Bridges of New Hampshire podcast is created and hosted by me and recorded in Hancock, New Hampshire. The song Old New Hampshire was arranged and performed by Josh Black. Our introduction is courtesy of Greg Kretschmar. This podcast is a companion to my book, Covered Bridges of New Hampshire. You can learn more about the book, explore blog posts, view covered bridge videos and photographs, check event listings, and access an interactive covered bridge map at coveredbridgesnh.com. Follow Covered Bridges of New Hampshire on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for additional content and updates. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Kim Chandler. Thank you for listening.